Hey everyone, welcome to the craziest moments of Midway Games. My name is Reyan Ali. I am the author of NBA Jam, the book, which you see right here. And I am currently joined by none other than Joe from Scarlet Sprites, fantastic YouTube channel. And he did a fantastic panel earlier today. It was at 2:30 Eastern, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, you definitely need to go back into the recording and check it out. It's actually going to pop up over here today, too, on our discussion. But yeah, we're going to talk about the craziest moments of Midway Games. And I will also mention, in terms of watching other panels, you guys should definitely check out Josh Sway's panel that just wrapped up without me, even though I was the moderator. Funny how that happens. Have been having some internet issues, unfortunately. AT&T doesn't like UPLINK for some reason. But it's gonna be a great show, and we're gonna get right through this awesome slideshow that I've got planned. Right, Joe?
That's absolutely correct.
We're going to make it happen 100%. Yeah. So just a little bit of background on me. I wrote a whole book about NBA Jam after spending 4 years learning about it. Did about 68 interviews along the way. Actually, I did exactly 68 interviews, I think, and talked to all kinds of people from the top of Midway and at the bottom. I learned a ton of stuff, and I got some really fun stuff over here to share. This is real deep cut Midway stuff. So if you're a hardcore Midway fan, you're definitely going to find something to like. So let's fire up this slideshow and let's get going. All right, let's see. All right, let me hit share on this. Let me hit present. All right, Joe, can you see the screen?
I can see the screen.
Okay, excellent. All right, so in the event that you guys haven't already, definitely check out Joe's YouTube channel, Scarlet Sprites, and then definitely follow us on Twitter and Instagram at NBA Jam Book and at Scarlet Sprites. So, Joe, just to introduce us to the audience, or just to get this whole conversation started, what are your big memories of Midway? Where do you start with Midway?
It's funny because it's probably not where most people would start. I was a big NBA Jam fan, like a lot of people, obviously. But the big moment for me was walking into the arcade and seeing Open Ice, because I was a big 90s hockey fan. And so seeing Open Ice standing, I was like, finally, I got NBA Jam done hockey style. I was stoked in that moment. That was my favorite, probably Midway moment that I can think of. It was just, playing as Eric Lindros as the Flyers, because I'm a big Flyers fan, but also just like all the tandems that existed. I mean, I know NBA Jam is the same way, but just the duos, for all those different sports throughout the 90s, it's incredible. And looking back on it now, being able to go back. I mean, on the Pittsburgh side, you got Lemieux and Yager. It's incredible. Gretzky and Curry on it's. I could just go on and on. I love Open Ice. That's my big Midway moment.
Midway is so special, and I mean, Open Ice itself, such a great game. I played the PC version when I was a kid, and I loved it. I never had a chance to play the arcade version until much later, but so good. And yeah, I think Midway also is responsible for introducing a whole group of people to sports. At least in my case, I got an NBA Jam because of Midway. I think that I'm sure it happened with people too with NHL Open Ice. I didn't know anything about hockey until Open Ice came along.
Yeah, it's absolutely it's so interesting, because you think like the video game crowd stereotypically isn't always like the biggest sports fans, but something like this takes off, and all of a sudden you're merging worlds.
Yeah, that'll do that. Yeah. So all right, so let me show you a little bit about my history with Midway for some context as to why somebody would go and write a book about NBA Jam. Well, it's because they were the kind of kid who had their mom take pictures of them playing Mortal Kombat 4 in 1998. So that is me. And I was trying to get my mom to take a picture of the screen, but she didn't really understand that. So she took pictures of me. In retrospect, probably a good thing, because it proves, I got some kind of bona fides over here playing Mortal Kombat 4 back in the day. But I was a huge Mortal Kombat fan. I actually got my first writing gig ever. My start was on a Mortal Kombat website. And you'll actually see it linked over here on the Grid's official website. For those of you out there who remember the Grid, we being MK NetherRealm was linked on the Grid's links page, and that was huge for the Grid's website. So that was pretty massive. And then also over here, just got to brag, I interviewed Shiva from Mortal Kombat Annihilation. So no, we could probably stop the panel right now if you want, because I participated in an MRC chat with her in 2001. I mean, I feel like that deserves its whole own panel, right?
I would absolutely agree.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. And she was super cool. Yeah, not the best movie, but you saw Mortal Kombat Annihilation, right?
I have. Yeah, I mean, it's a little forgettable, but yes, it's been a while, but I saw it.
Yeah.
What kind
Forgettable
of
that's great.
anecdotes?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say,
Go
like,
ahead.
what kind of
Yeah.
anecdotes did she have to say? I mean, was she aware at that time, like, the movie, like, wasn't quite as great as they had hoped it to be? Like, did she reflect on that at all?
She did. She was so light about it too. I mean, this was just 4 years removed from the movie, but even back then, of course, everybody knew how bad it was. You calling it forgettable, I think, is just it's very kind. It's much worse than forgettable. As a huge Mortal Kombat fan, there's a soft spot. I have a soft spot for Mortal Kombat Annihilation, but it's not very good. Yeah, she was just super pleasant, really upbeat. She, just wanted to answer questions about Shiva, even though I don't think she was a Mortal Kombat player herself.
Right.
But apparently, yeah, according to this chat log from August 22nd, 2001, she knew the portal stomp. So good for her. I mean, that move is killer in Mortal
Yeah,
Kombat 3.
that is impressive.
Yeah. All right, so let's dive in over here. Oh, by the way, yes, my handle was Pain Game back then. I don't know why I went by Pain Game, but that was me. All right.
I wasn't going to question it.
Yeah, that was the next question. All right, so let's go into the actual the meat of this. So what I really wanted to do was look at some bizarre stories about Midway, things that you might know, you might not know, hopefully things you don't know, and then kind of look at how that figures into Midway overall. So I had to start off over here with a pretty good tease. The man behind Titanic is also inadvertently responsible for Mortal Kombat and NBA Jam. So just something to think about over there. Of course, I'm talking about James Cameron. So this story in particular goes back to I believe it was the very early 90s. So James Cameron, he, of course, worked on the original Terminator, which was a huge movie. And then the rights came along for potentially working with it on an arcade game. And then there was a few people from Midway. Pictured over here, you've got George Petro on the left, you've got Jack Hager in the middle, and Roger Sharp on the right. So Petro and Hager were on the development side. Sharp was on the marketing side. And they went out to, I think it was to California. It was either California or Florida. I've got the actual place in my book. Definitely corroborated for that. But they went out to go meet with representatives from Carolco and Lightstorm Entertainment because they had the rights to the next big movie, which was Terminator 2. So what they needed to do was convince James Cameron to sell the Terminator 2 rights to them, rather to grant them the Terminator 2 rights. Initially, they were looking for video games, and they also wanted pinball. And things started to go well for them after they brought in. Let's see. Oh wait. First, I got to show you these concept pieces. So they got little bits and pieces of working with what Terminator 2 was actually about, but they didn't know too much. They had special copies of the script that they got to see. But what they did bring in was NARC. So what they did was imagine in the early 90s, very early 90s, before Terminator 2 was even come out, guys from Midway fly out, they bring videotapes of NARC with them for James Cameron to look at. So James Cameron was sitting there at a table with these guys from Midway, listening to their pitch about them wanting to do a Terminator 2 game and looking at this footage from NARC. And his reaction was incredible. So he said, "You guys are making movies like I am." So James Cameron was so impressed with seeing NARC back in the day and the digitization techniques that were in that game that he granted Midway the Terminator 2 license. And not only that, but he said, "Midway, come on and visit the set while we're making the movie." So they actually got to have Robert Patrick in the game, and they might have had Edward Furlong or somebody else from the movie in the game too. But that all started because of NARC, which is so wild to think of. And then, of course, with this, you've got Terminator 2, the movie coming out, then Terminator 2, the game being so huge that the game ends up being a huge, huge success for Midway and changing how they looked at things. So in the early 90s, right when they were starting to toy with this idea of digitization, they weren't really working with licenses. They had things like NARC, which was unlicensed. They had Arch Rivals, which came over from the former Midway. That was unlicensed too. And then they had the Terminator 2 arcade game. And this game sold gangbusters. This sold, I believe it was something like 10,000 units, which is just incredible. Joe, did you ever play the Terminator 2 arcade game? Were you much of a fan of it?
Oh yeah. I mean, I finished it. I remember I can tell a story about this too. I remember being on vacation, and when you were a kid, it was always that whole, we didn't come to the beach so that you could play video games kind of thing.
Yes.
But there was a Terminator 2 machine that was at the golf course near the resort that we were staying. And I went down there with a friend who was with us on that trip, and we spent hours in there just quarter feeding this thing, and we finished the whole game.
That's incredible.
That's my memory of my childhood vacation.
No, that's so good. And I mean, that's what resorts are about, right? That to me is what vacations are about. It's like going to the hotel lobby and seeing if they've got, I don't know, Cadillacs and dinosaurs or something for you to play, you know, when you don't want to go out to the beach.
That's right.
So, yeah, that sounds like a great vacation. So one of the things I also learned about while working on the book was the huge success of this game, to the point that not only did it sell 10,000 cabinets, but to the point that people had heard about this Terminator 2 game being out there on test in Chicago, and it actually drove out to Chicago to play this game. So I don't know what kind of news source there was out there. I mean, this is the very early 90s, so I can't really imagine it was the internet. But people were actually traveling to play the test version of Terminator 2 in Chicago, which would have been pretty cool.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And then with that, so Terminator 2 success meant that licensing was the big thing. Now with this, Midway wanted Jean-Claude Van Damme to star in Mortal Kombat at first. So Ed Boon and John Tobias on the Mortal Kombat team, they're coming up with this idea for the game. And Midway says, you need to get Jean-Claude Van Damme. Of course, Jean-Claude Van Damme doesn't end up working out, but Mortal Kombat does. And then the huge success that was Mortal Kombat started off because there was this impetus at Midway for them to go after licenses and then look at Jean-Claude Van Damme. That didn't work out, but then they brought in their own stars like Johnny Cage. And then, of course, NBA Jam, big license over there. That was all because of Terminator 2. So to some degree, it is true that the director of the director of Titanic is responsible for the success of Midway in the 90s, in the early 90s, with Mortal Kombat 2, NBA Jam, and then NFL Blitz and Revolution X, etc., which is pretty strange to think about. So I absolutely had to look up, I had to Google search Titanic Mortal Kombat just for this image. So don't really know what's going on over here. I feel like, is Jack running for the iceberg? I mean, this looks like he wants to fight it, right? It looks like he's actually going for it.
It does. I mean, I think I'm definitely playing Leo if if I'm coining this up, I definitally want to be Leo. Like there's no other option.
No other option. Oh yeah. And I feel like Billy Zane would probably be the final boss. He'd be up there. If the Glacier's a selectable character, Billy Zane's got to be way up here.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, all right. So let's move on from Terminator 2 to NBA Jam. So we've got over here Mark Trammell. So Mark Trammell at this point in the story, let's say it's going to be about, I'd say it's 91, 92 or so. Actually, maybe it's even a little bit earlier than that. So he's pretty fresh to Midway. Granted, this picture is from before he joined Midway. But he was a big Michigan guy, huge Michigan guy. Now keep in mind, Midway's based out of Chicago. So he is entering enemy territory. And there's this whole rivalry at the time between the Chicago Bulls and the Detroit Pistons. And of course, there's that whole famous Bad Boys era. And then Jordan's era starts to really come up. So, by the late 80s, the Pistons were doing great and still beating the Bulls. But of course, the tide would change. And there were so many Bulls fans in that Chicago office that people were wearing the merchandise everywhere. And, there was lots of Bulls pride. So I've got over here John Tobias, the co-creator of Mortal Kombat, wearing a Chicago Bulls hat. We've got Ed Boon over here. I think this is during the making of Mortal Kombat 3. We've got Steve Ritchie in the background over there, I think. And he's wearing a three-peat Bulls shirt. So playing with the timeline over here a little bit, but you get the idea. Like there's a big crosstown rivalry. Are you much of a basketball fan, Joe?
I am. I'm a big Sixers fan. So obviously not when they were intentionally tanking. I wasn't watching too many games. I took a bit of a, hiatus there, but I do remember like even being here in like South Central Pennsylvania, everybody had Bulls stuff on during this time. I can't even imagine what it was like out in actually being in Chicago because everybody, it's like Oakland Raiders stuff too. Like everybody just embraced whatever that culture was at the time that was popular. People were wearing that stuff.
It was huge. Yeah. And here's Trammell, a guy in enemy territory. So, he's come from Michigan. He's going to rep the Pistons, even with these Bulls fans. So I've got a little paragraph in the book about this too. So just to summarize this, what Trammell would do is he would, as the Pistons were winning, he would wear his Pistons gear to the Chicago office, to Midway Chicago office, and he would chant, "Bad boys, bad boys," and then it would just drive the Bulls fans nuts. And that to me was just so amazing that there's this rivalry that is extending into the workplace. So one of the things that he did around this time, now of course, was work on the game Total Carnage. So the Motor City Bad Boys era, that was the late 90s. And then of course the Bulls were coming in. And Trammell had this game coming out, Total Carnage, and he still really wanted for the Pistons to be represented in there. So what he did was there was a screen over here that I found while watching a playthrough where this is just some instructional interstitial, but he made it a point to add over here. If you'll see, you've got Eat at Brown's, which is a fried chicken place near Midway. But if you look underneath it, it says Bulls rule now, Pistons will rule the NBA again, Midway rules. So putting aside the Midway rules, that is super petty. That is so amazingly petty to me that Mark is such a big Pistons fan that he's going to take a screen in his game to put that out there. Not only that, Joe, do you know where this is going, the famous myth?
Oh, I do. I don't have to spoil it for everybody. Yeah.
This is a good one. So it all leads into him making NBA Jam next. So he made Total Carnage, didn't do so well. Then he made NBA Jam. So you've got the NBA Jam team over here. I'm pretty sure Sal's a Chicago native. John Hay, definitely a Chicago native, or at least definitely a Bulls fan. Don't know about John Carlton or Jamie Rivet over here, but Mark Turmel in the back, huge Pistons fan, of course. So when he had the chance to make his own basketball game, when it was just him making his baby NBA Jam, he knew what he had to do. He had to rig the game. So he made it so that if you're playing the game and it was the Bulls versus the Pistons, by the fourth quarter, Scottie Pippen, who was the Bulls representation in NBA Jam, would be shooting bricks. So he made it a point to not only add that in the game, but of course, and keep in mind that there's no Michael Jordan in the game, so it's already missing that. But he really didn't want the Bulls to win, and he was going in and playing with this code. And what's funny is that there was people at Midway who were like, at least one in particular, a gentleman, I think his name was Paul Heisler, who was like, "Why are you doing this? Like, this isn't fair. You're making the game." Adding cheating to the game. So I'm pretty sure what Turmel did was Paul Heisler's a secret character in NBA Jam Tournament Edition. I'm pretty sure he's the single worst secret character because he had an issue with Turmel's cheating. But that to me was really amazing about Midway too, is that there's this spirit where like, you know what, I'm gonna go in, I'm gonna rig this huge game for my team because that's what I want to do. I mean, it's ultimately Turmel's game, so he gets to do that. And what's funny too is that this story has grown in reputation. I see go viral every few years. And it was just in the news again recently. But what isn't really talked about as much is the fact that Turmel also made sure that the Lions were better than the other teams in NFL Blitz. So this is one of those things I don't know too much about. As in, I don't know about it to the degree of the Pistons versus the Bulls rivalry. But I do know that the Lions are definitely supposed to be better than other teams in NFL Blitz. And there was clearly that love for NFL Blitz, or rather the love for the Lions, because you see in this early promo art, you've got the Lions being represented over here with this on fire mode that I don't think happened until Blitz 99. Joe, did you know about the whole Lions being better than everybody else in NFL Blitz?
I had heard that rumored, but like you, I don't know much about the details or, if there's a certain quarter that kicks in versus another. But I had heard the rumor.
Yeah, I haven't heard too much. Yeah, I need to get more nitty gritty, get more details about it. But I know the fact that it exists, and knowing Turmel, knowing if you went through all that trouble to not only add that screen to Total Carnage, but to edit the code in NBA Jam, I gotta believe that the lines have to be better. Yeah. All right, let's move on. Oh, well, go ahead. What's that?
I love the pettiness. I love it. Like especially now looking back on it, like it's great. And the whole Bulls, Pistons thing, like that would really anger me if the Sixers were involved in that. Like I'd probably still be mad about it, but because it's two other teams, I'm like, oh, that's great. That's great.
Yeah, it's something fascinating to watch from distance. If they did that to the Supersonics for whatever reason, I would have. Yeah, I probably would have canceled NBA Jam back then. There would be no NBA Jam. Yeah. But yeah, all right. So let's move on over to another amazing subject over here, and this is Reptile's finger licking roots, which I just wanted to write down Reptile's finger licking roots. How often do you get to do that? But of course, NBA Jam had its famous on fire mode. And that on fire mode started at this very Burger King in Chicago. This very place was where Mark Turmel and Jamie Rivet, and let me jump back over here for a quick second. All right, so you've got Mark over here and then Jamie over here. So they went on lunch one day. I think this was in 1992 when they were still working on NBA Jam, or then just putting the finishing touches on NBA Jam, rather putting the game together. And they decided to go out to Burger King. And while on the way to Burger King, Jamie Rivet had the idea to add some kind of fire graphics to the game, or some kind of smoke graphics, because he loved the idea of having fire smoke graphics in his game. So it was at this very Burger King that they came up with On Fire. Now, I don't think there's any kind of relationship to the whole like flame grilled thing or the Whopper thing, but this very Burger King is a very important place for arcade history. in a weird way. I was in Chicago. I went to go see this Burger King, actually. Or rather, I was near the Midway offices. I passed by this Burger King just so I could be like, I was near the Burger King where On Fire was invented. But that wasn't the only place where something amazing happened. So changing around the timeline over here, playing with the timeline here. So before NBA Jam comes out, these guys, of course, they love fast food. And Ed Boon is on the Mortal Kombat team, and he's trying to figure out a way to beef up his own game too. So Scorpion and Sub-Zero, of course, are the two main default ninjas in Mortal Kombat. And then Ed Boon is one day at a KFC drive-thru. In fact, this very KFC drive-thru right near the Midway office, when he thought, boy, we've got a blue ninja, we've got a yellow ninja, why don't we make a green one? So Boon was somewhere, over here or past here in his car on a Saturday or Sunday afternoon thinking about his game when he came up with this famous character, Reptile. And it was just so incredible to me that, that Boon is not only thinking about it in off hours, but like inspiration strikes anywhere. Inspiration strikes at the KFC. So not only do you have NBA Jam's amazing origin story involving this Burger King, but you have this KFC as a very special place for Mortal Kombat fans too. Joe, are you familiar with either of these myths or either of these legends of the famous Burger King or the famous KFC?
I'm not familiar with that. I was actually going to ask you if you like to partake in fast food drive-thrus, and if any particular one in particular was inspiration to NBA Jam, the book.
Oh man, gosh, I'm trying to think of what did I really eat. It's not fast food, but I definitely chugged lots of those. They're like these coconut Red Bulls. God, they're just like,
oh yeah.
Yeah, they're one of those things where like after I drink them, I'm like, why did I just drink all this coconut Red Bull? But man, it was pretty good. So yeah, NBA Jam, the book had a flavor. I can't really think of a fast food offhand because I was doing lots of, it was more like 5 Hour Energies and Red Bulls. God, not good stuff.
Well, you're a healthy guy.
Yeah, that was that. Exactly. Yeah. Look, unlike these Midway slobs who are out here eating fast food, I only put the good stuff in my body: 5 Hour Energy, berry flavor, and coconut Red Bull. But yeah, so it was that would be what the flavor of NBA Jam book would be.
I did not know any of this regarding the character creation. It's pretty cool.
That's so cool. Yeah. All right. Well, one more quick bonus story over here is that there's a third story to go along with this. I wasn't sure whether it was worth a slide or not, so I'll just throw it in right now. So going back even further, I went from NBA Jam back over to Mortal Kombat, going back to NARC. When NARC was on test for the first time, George Petro, Eugene Jarvis, and the NARC team, what they did was they ate these really nasty sounding, they're probably delicious, pizza puffs, these really greasy pizza puffs, while watching NARC on test. So the very first time that these guys ever got to see the public play NARC, they were eating these pizza puffs. So I guess fast food and Midway, they're like simpatico, you know what I mean? Like they go right together.
Yeah. It's not like any of these stories are originating out of like a Gold's Gym or Planet Fitness or anything like that. These are programmers, like
exactly,
pretty much, right?
These are the real guys. Yeah, they probably went back to the office right after doing all these things. Yeah, Edwin probably went in on Sunday and made Reptile that Sunday. And of course, Reptile was such a huge character that is I think he makes a cameo in Mortal Kombat 11. I don't think he's in Mortal Kombat 11. But it's so funny to me that all this starts off with these simple things like going through a KFC drive-thru.
I love it.
Let's jump on over to another secret character, or rather a few secret characters. This is fun. This is something that I really had no idea about until I learned about it while I was working on the book. So these are about the NBA Jam secret characters that never were. So going on into that Chicago office, so you had Sal DeVita and that whole NBA Jam team going back on over to them. So they knew that their game was a lot of fun, but they didn't know at this point that it was necessarily going to be a hit or how much oversight they were going to get with future games. So they thought, why not? Why don't we just add ourselves into the game? So I've got some footage over here from back in the day from the Midway studio of Sal DeVita getting his mugshot taken for NBA Jam. So this moment over here, this is when Sal DeVita is becoming an NBA Jam character. It's only 30 seconds or so long, I think, but these are all the angles they needed. I think they needed something like 8 or 9 angles to put a character in NBA Jam. But just doing this, and Sal's going to leave the camera, that was good enough. So it was so funny to think that, something so small started off with something that took 30 seconds for one guy to do. Let's see. Let me go on over to this screen over here, where actually you'll see Sal is wearing the same sweater.
Yeah.
As in this one. Yeah. So this is all around the same time period. It was so funny to me that the NBA Jam team is going in and taking time to put themselves in the game, and making the secret character concept. So then the secret character concept, of course, blows up, becomes huge. People started wanting to play as the developers, even though these guys are not famous, but because they're secret characters in NBA Jam. And then, of course, it starts to get crazier from there, as then Acclaim takes the ball that these guys started off with, and then they roll with it to the point where you've got the Beastie Boys in there, you've got the Fresh Prince, you've got DJ Jazzy Jeff in there, you've got Bill Clinton, Hillary Clinton, George Clinton in there also. We've got Brad Lowhouse over here. Ignore him. He's just a regular character in NBA Jam, but just want to leave him in with George. And, of course, you've got athletes like Warren Moon, Randall Cunningham. You've got Heavy D. You had a whole bunch of other people in there. You had, of course, Air Dog. How about you, Joe? Did you have any kind of classic secret characters that you really liked from any of the systems?
Yeah, so I was going to say, I'm blanking on her name. I know she was the model for Sonya. Is it Hoskins? Was that her?
Yes, Carrie Hoskins. Yeah.
Yeah, that
she
was
she was in Tournament Edition. What's funny too is that she was rumored to be in the first one, because you can see her in the background. And of course, at that time, there were all these rumors floating around. Well, she wasn't added until NBA Jam Tournament Edition, but Mark Trammell still told people that you got to look harder in the NBA Jam machine. Sonya or Carrie Hoskins is somewhere in there.
Yeah.
So I mean, they were messing around with people. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, doing anything to make that money. But what's funny is that Trammell and the team actually came up with the first secret characters themselves that were not designers. And this is some rare footage that I got from Trammell from back in the day. This is them adding Godzilla to the game, or adding Godzilla potentially for the game.
That's fantastic.
It's so funny to me. Yeah, thinking about that, they were doing all this, not knowing how big of this concept was going to be, that, somebody would just, this is Godzilla, but somebody would go in and add the president. They would add, Prince Charles in there, Al Gore, all these random people. But Midway, I think they had some kind of inkling of it too, considering that they were doing all this with the secret character. So that was one, and then they go in and have another one. Now keep in mind, neither of these characters appeared in the game, but there's Bart Simpson. So Bart Simpson and Godzilla were both potentially going to be in NBA Jam, and I'm sure cooler heads prevailed, or rather wiser heads prevailed, considering that I imagine that Fox and I think it's Toho who's responsible for Godzilla. They would be super litigious over something like this.
Yeah, I can imagine. Simpsons at that time too was super popular. I can't imagine them letting that go.
It was huge, yeah, and something really big, yeah, like NBA Jam would have not flown under the radar for too long. And this is more relating to Acclaim than it is to Midway. But one of the things that I learned while working on the book was that neither DJ Jazzy Jeff nor George Clinton were paid to be in NBA Jam. So these are iconic characters, or at least, to a certain generation of people, to a certain generation of fans, at least to me, and neither of them got any money for being in the game, which is so weird when you think about it. I mean, can you imagine trying to do that now, where you put like some famous celebrity in there, and think about it, just you make a game, you release a game, you throw in Kanye over there, and you don't tell him that he's in the game. I mean, something would have definitely happened.
It's not going to fly. And George Clinton, I think, is probably doing all right. I don't know how Jazzy Jeff's doing these days. He might need that money if he could have gotten a licensing agreement.
Yeah, actually, from what I understand, it's the other way around, where DJ Jazzy Jeff is doing really well for himself. Yeah, I imagine those Fresh Prince of Bel-Air royalties are probably doing well for him too.
You're right.
But when I talked to George Clinton, this was one of the most interesting conversations I had while working on the book. I said, where were you in like 93, 94, 95 when NBA Jam came out, when people were playing as your character? And he said to me, I was a crackhead at that time. And I was like, wow, George, man, you are very honest. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
But it was really illuminating learning about that, is that, he was actually did not have a lot of money. And he was really bothered by the fact that games like NBA Jam, or rather this game came out and they didn't give him any kind of compensation. And he's finding the same kind of thing happening with these record labels too. Now, of course, this is just George's recollection itself. But when I talked to DJ Jazzy Jeff, he said the same kind of thing, where just one day somebody told him, hey, you're in the game. And then he went and looked, and he was in the game. But I mean, that, this is just such a different era. both Midway and Acclaim, they kind of represent this Wild West that's very different from how it is in video games.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You'd have all kinds of lawyers and attorneys checking boxes and making sure that they were fully covered before they rolled out some type of property like this, especially tied to an NBA license
The
in
NBA.
itself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's just wild to me that they got away with it. But yeah, so I showed the Midway secret characters. Going back on over to Acclaim, cheating a little bit over here, I got to show you a couple of the secret characters that never happened for the home versions. So this is stuff that I haven't been able to find any kind of screenshots of. I found references here and there in like old guides, like pre-release guides for the home versions of the games or stuff people have told me. But yeah, once upon a time, Ted Nugent himself was going to be an NBA Jam. So I imagine this would have been NBA Jam or NBA Jam Tournament Edition, one of the home games. But not only Ted Nugent, but Flea from Red Hot Chili Peppers too.
Oh, wow.
And that would have been pretty cool. I mean, you know, when it comes to musicians, like who you have in NBA Jam? You've got George Clinton, Heavy D, Gigi Jazzy Jeff, the Beastie Boys. You don't have a ton of rock and roll guys, so it would have been cool to have something else in there. I mean, to play as Flea and Red Hot Chili Peppers, I feel like he would have been one of those characters that people still look back on, you know?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, I think that people would be getting nostalgic over Flea in NBA Jam Tournament Edition. But yeah, you know, I'm hoping that somewhere out there there's some graphics or something that can absolutely validate this for me. But I definitely heard that both Ted Nugent and Flea were supposed to be there, but then they weren't.
Nice.
But you know what that means? That means is there's time for somebody to make a hack of them. So you know, people have already put Michael Jordan in NBA Jam. Why not put Flea in NBA Jam? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. So let's go on over to another one over here. All right. So we've got some wild stories of WWF WrestleMania. So in this case, so I was unfortunately I had a couple of technical issues. I was playing with some videos, managed to get the videos to play, but couldn't play the audio. So instead, I'll tell you a couple of stories about this. So WWF WrestleMania came out in 1995 and directly competed with Mortal Kombat 3. So, you know, the guys on the NBA Jam team that made this game, of course, were very proud of it, and they put a lot of work into it, and it's become a cult classic since. But WWF WrestleMania at that time was not a big success, to the point that there was a trade convention where I believe it was Neil Nicastro, who's the CEO of Midway. You know, he had to put his arm around Termel's shoulder, or say something like, you know, didn't happen with this one. The next game's going to be a hit. So this game, that's this big cult classic, you know, actually suffered from the fact that it was competing with another product from the same company. And, you know, it's one of those things where WWF WrestleMania has gained a really good reputation in the years that have followed, but it wasn't a big hit at the time, which is a shame because I thought it was really cool. What about you? Are you a big wrestling fan, or did you ever play WrestleMania?
So I was a big like Hogan fan as a kid, but by this time in my life, I really was not into wrestling all that much. I'm aware of this game, obviously, you know, in looking back in retrospect, but it's also, I'll nerd out here for a second with you. It's one of the Midway Wolf boards that I don't have. It's the only one in that collection that I don't have. So I got, you know, NBA Hang Time, Maximum Hang Time. I have the Open Ice one we talked about. Rampage World Tour was another one in this same series.
Yeah.
Mortal Kombat 3, Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3, and WrestleMania is on that same type of hardware, and it's the one game that I don't have. I would like to get it eventually and pick that up, but I've played it obviously in the past few years, but not at the time when it was first released, which is kind of going along with what you're saying. It doesn't seem like many people did.
Yeah, well, it became a big hit on the home consoles when Acclaim put it out, but you know, the Midway guys, at least at the time, didn't really get to enjoy the fruits of their labor to the degree that they should have. But yeah, just a little bit more about WrestleMania. So, you know, you'll see over here, The Undertaker was part of the game, and one of the best stories that I learned while working on the book was that, you know, when The Undertaker showed up at Midway for his first day of work, his first day of being filmed for this game, he refused to start until he was provided a bottle of Jack Daniels. Wow. So that was the Undertaker's criteria for being in WWF WrestleMania, the arcade game, which is just so great to me and lines up with what I've heard about him. Bam Bam Bigelow. So, you know, it was funny is that a lot of the people that worked on this game, in terms of the wrestlers, had more interactions with it beyond just, you know, showing up and that was it. For example, we've got Bam Bam Bigelow over here, who was actually part of Midway's demonstrations to the arcade owners and the arcade operators. So Bam Bam was part of WrestleMania's big debut. And then Bret the Hitman Hart over here was also a big part of the game's promotion. You know, he would go in and he recorded videos for Midway too, where he went around the office and, you know, driving a forklift, you know, going through the shelves and the audio booth, all this stuff. And I don't think that he really played arcade games from what I could understand about Brett, but man, he was really into this idea of this game that he was working on. So definitely check out this tape on YouTube. It's called WrestleMania Brawl of the Century. That's going to have a lot of the good stuff in there about Bret Hart. But yeah, they had all these great talents working on the game. And, you know, I was just talking to Josh Sway earlier, shout out to him. And we're talking about how the fact that Adam Bomb wasn't in the game, who was one of the big wrestlers that was always rumored to be in there. But what's really funny to me is that Diesel wasn't in the game. I know that, yeah, you must have been like an 80s, early 90s guy, I imagine.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. But Big Daddy Cool Diesel was a big deal in 94. And of course, with, you know, as part of the NWO in the late 90s as Kevin Nash, he had even more fame. And it's so weird that he was left out of this game. I still don't know why. But yeah, you've got some big characters in there, some big wrestlers, but no WWF champion.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So let's go on over here to the last slideshow selection I had for right now. Gosh, there's some real fun stuff over here. So I had to say, like, what can I do to talk about Midway in a way that, you know, you don't always hear about? Of course, we always hear about the games. We don't hear too much about The Office. So I want to talk about Midway, home to both Outrun and Outbreak. Now, why Outrun and why Outbreak? We'll find out. So one of the things that, you know, yeah, as I was working on the book, I just learned just how dingy Midway was, just how rundown this place was. This was, at least from what I understand, it was pretty rundown. But yeah, there was, you know, of course, there were developers that worked here, and these developers, you know, they gave it all. They were sleeping on couches over there. They were doing lots of crunch, staying there all the time, lots of soda, lots of junk food. Carrie Hoskins, when I talked to her, she says that one of her distinct memories was walking around Midway and just seeing all these junk food wrappers right near the garbage bins or inside the garbage bins. That was one of her main memories of that, and the couches, and thinking, like, these guys live here. Like, these guys really pour their lives into these games. But they would do all kinds of stuff at Midway. They would have these, you know, of course, the high voltage monitors, and they were not very careful about this. You know, Joe, you in your panel earlier, you referenced the fact that you got to be careful with arcade equipment, right?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I was showing that one photo I took of the anode cap that goes right into the monitor. I mean, that thing is charged, and you can't. Well, you shouldn't touch that when the machine's turned on. I mean, you're going to get a nasty shock. I know those tubes even hold a charge after they're turned off. A lot of those things didn't auto discharge, especially in the 80s. And if you touch or go poking around in there, even if it's turned off, you can find yourself on the floor.
Absolutely, yeah. And this is why it's staggering to me that Midway was the kind of place where you just leave the arcade monitors right on the table. I think it was Sean Liptek, who was developer on NBA Jam, who wasn't in the picture that I showed earlier, but he told me a story about how, you know, he would see this and he'd be like, "What are you guys doing? This is very dangerous." But you know, it was a different place. It was a different era. Now this next slide over here, if I'm not correct, or rather if I'm not incorrect, it's going to tie into your panel too, Joe. So Joe, earlier you told a story involved some kind of rodent, right?
Yeah, rats. Yeah.
Yeah. It was involved rats. Yeah.
Yes,
Which
yes.
brings me right here to some more rats. Yeah. So we went from rats. So Joe's story was involving there being some rat excrement and some rat urine it was a virtual racing cabinet, right?
It was. And there was actually 3 dead rats inside of that machine as well.
Oh, Lord.
So yes, with all the fun things that go along with those. And yeah, that's the kind of thing you do to pick up an arcade bargain.
That's what you do. And if you're an arcade developer, I guess rats just come with the territory.
Yeah.
So Eugene Jarvis over here, who of course is the great creator of Robotron, Defender, worked on Smash TV, Cruising USA, Narc, tons of classics. Eugene Jarvis told me this great story involving the Midway vending machine. So there was actually a vending machine in Midway where, now keep in mind, these are just Google searches that related to the subject, not actual pictures from Midways. So this isn't actually a rat that existed in Midway back in the day. This did pull up when I looked up rat vending machine. But what they would do was at Midway is they would actually lower the empty, or rather they would empty out the lower layer of the vending machine because the rats would get in. So the rats would always be eating the first layer of food. So they would just add all the food higher. And of course,
I,
people
I
are still using the vending machine.
like that's the solution to the problem was just to, you know what, it's not the rats, it's
Right.
just that we got to move
Yeah,
all the food up.
exactly. Yeah,
We'll
I guess
still
that's
eat
what you
it.
do. Yeah, it's still fine. Yeah, I mean, come on, that Reese's. If you're in the mood for Reese's, I mean, if it's a Snickers, if you're feeling hungry, they ask why wait. So
Right.
that's what you do at Midway. You just go to the vending machine where you've got rats at the bottom, and then you've got some, I don't know what that is on the left, some Oreo minis on top. So
Yeah.
so another story that Eugene told me. Well, yeah. So just tying into this, just as an aside, I'm really happy with the fact that I was able to find a picture of a rat in a vending machine. And this picture is actually very recent. There was some kind of viral story. So this is, I think somebody posted this on Twitter just to give you an idea how recent this was. So yeah, rats are still in vending machines everywhere. But Eugene Jarvis also told me stories of how the rat problem at Midway was so bad that there would be rats scurrying across the street outside the complex. So, Midway was right on North California Avenue, which was this busy intersection, and there would be rats going across the street. So it would not be out of the ordinary to see a dead corpse of a rat someplace, or to see, rat bodies. So that was Midway back in the day. And
They just embrace that culture. It sounds like this is basically a frat house. What you're describing, like this was a frat.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And it was just this Wild West culture, yeah. And the fact that they're saying, you know what, yeah, this is the solution. Get rid of the bottom layer of the vending machine.
Right.
Yeah. Let the rats have their fun.
It sounds like a bunch of guys that you were going to sell a lot of things out of a vending machine too. You can't get rid of that, especially if you're the vending company. That you want that place on your route.
Maybe it's a coin thing. You know what I mean? That affection for coin-op products is like, we want people to play our machines when they're busted or their cigarette burns on them or the marquee doesn't light up. I'm still going to eat, this Hershey's bar if there's a rat inside the machine.
Absolutely.
But this leads me to this amazing, amazing quote. So this is actually 3 slides over here, so it's going to keep going. This is from Jim Green, who's the creative director at Midway back in the day. And this is worth reading out loud. The contrast between the facility where we worked and the brilliant, amazing talent making the internationally famous products the company produced couldn't have been any greater. The building was kind of a 1950s office building hellhole, just a brick's throw from the dank North Branch of the Chicago River. Jim Green's contribution over here, by the way, is just poetry. I wasn't able to include it in the book because it's so long, but gosh, this is just so good. There was nothing even remotely feng shui about the place. I don't know if there's an opposite to feng shui, but this was. A fluorescent, asbestos-lined, mouse-infested, busted door, crap land featuring the constant smell of stale brewed coffee and used machine oil. And you've got not only you got the rats from the previous slide, but now you've got mice over here too. So now we've got the double corroboration of this. So there's definitely a problem. If I'm not confused, the video game design department housed a central area with lots of dingy work areas bordered by offices that had windows, which should have looked back into the central area, but were instead covered with posters in a vain attempt to diminish glare and the profound depression that a view of that post-apocalyptic cubicle wasteland would produce. It wasn't very nice. Like, isn't this just so evocative? Like, wouldn't you read a book based on these descriptions of Midway?
It's like this is like Robert Frost or like Shakespearean almost. Like this is
beautiful.
It paints the picture for me.
He's a very talented writer. And keep in mind, this was all through email. And sometimes those email interviews aren't so hot, but this was a winner. And then finally over here we've got his story about visiting Matt Booty. So Matt Booty went from a sound guy to being one of the top guys at Midway. Now he's over at Microsoft. I believe he's on the Minecraft team, way up there. Jim Green says, I remember visiting Matt Booty, who at the time was in charge of the sound department and had an old driving game in his office. Just below the carpeting in the center of his office, they discovered some kind of septic chemical waste hole that no one ever wanted opened. It was supposed to have been welded shut, but after a while, Matt noticed that a good rain would dampen his carpet and it kind of stunk. He told me that the guys showed up to clean the damn thing out wearing some kind of hazmat suits with gas masks and everything. Just like that movie with Dustin Hoffman and Rene Russo. Outbreak. Matt had been working on top of that gateway to the netherworld for the better part of a year. Never stopped anyone from going to his office to play Outrun, though.
It's amazing.
Wow.
It's like the vending machine. It's like it's a Band-Aid on all of the problems as opposed to fixing the actual health hazard that exists in your building.
This is what they did, yeah. And I just really also like the fact that Matt Booty managed to rise from being a sound guy. I think he was like maybe a sound hardware guy in NBA Jam or some of those games before that, and then rise up the ranks to the point where he's the CEO of the company, and now he's in this important position at Minecraft. But even he had these very humble origins of being in an office where these guys with hazmat suits came in. So hazmat suits, not just for COVID, not just for Breaking Bad, they're for Midway too.
Yeah. Also, Matt Booty. Did he give out any middle names or nicknames that went along with? I mean, I feel like that's just prime for the pickings.
It is, yeah. I can't imagine. Yeah, the name Matt Booty. Actually, the original title of the slide was like Booty's problem with Outbreak and Outrun. Or something like that. So I was thinking about it.
You were almost there. Yeah,
I was almost there. I was close to it, but yeah. No, Matt Booty is somebody who also has some really interesting perspective on Midway. He was right there at the very end. He was the final CEO. Let's see. Let me go over here. All right. Let me pull out from this. All right. Okay. So let's see. Can you still see my screen? All right. I'm not sure if you can. All right. Can you see the last slide over here, which was the same as the first slide?
Not right
Let's
now.
see. Not right now. Okay. All right. So then I will actually let me. I want to read the chat. So I'm going to go through
the craziest. You had it there for a second.
Oh, I had the
yeah.
Okay.
You had the slide up. Yep.
I had the slide up. All right. Okay. Let's see over here.
There it is.
All right. So you can see it now. Okay. All right. So then let me just turn away for a second. I'll leave the slide over here. Present on this. All right. So let's see. Yeah. Let's go through some of these comments over here. We got Boom Baptist in the house. You guys should definitely go out and check out his recording earlier on that he did. Yeah, he does NBA Jam theme music, so shout out to him.
I was sitting in on that. I was having a little bit of problems getting into some of the panels, but that was the first one that opened up, and I was like, I don't even want to go anywhere else. This is awesome. I'm just going to sit and chill and listen to this.
Yeah. Oh, it's quality stuff. All right. Oh, Jeremy Rydell says that's actually a figure named Big Rex, not Godzilla, but Godzilla was an obvious influence for that figure. Ooh, I did not know that.
Yeah.
Trivia on trivia. I like that. I wonder if the Midway guys were thinking about that. They probably would have put him in the game as Godzilla, though. Knowing that.
Right, and then you would have had 2 lawsuits.
Wow. Both the Big Rex LLC.
Yeah, getting labeled as Godzilla, and then you got Godzilla coming after you for the name.
That would have been really rough. All right, let's see. Yeah, DJ Jazzy Jeff is killing it still. Yeah, DJ Jazzy Jeff, when I talked to him for the book, was one of the most decent guys. I remember playing hooky for my work, slipping down the stairs, getting to my car, talking to him at 9:30 on, I think, a Wednesday morning. This is right when I started working on the book. It was one of my first interviews. Very decent guy, loves NBA Jam. Huge fan of NBA Jam, even though he didn't really play. He's more of like an NBA Live guy, but he really appreciates NBA Jam, really respects NBA Jam.
Yeah, I'd like to apologize for my comment and diss on DJ Jazzy Jeff because I did not know he was still current and doing. It is, and I'm going to go look him up when we're done here. I deserve to pay some respect.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I feel bad about it, and that's going to be my takeaway from UPLINK.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, my takeaway so far is Big Rex. So you've got DJ Jazzy Jeff, I've got Big Rex. This is not going so bad. All right, what else do we have over here? Let's see. Bret Hart making it happen. Oh yeah, Bret Hart really leaned in to that whole. Working on the WF WrestleMania thing, at least for those promo videos. Definitely check out Brawl of the Century. All right, Justice for Atom Bomb. Oh, absolutely. Oh, thank you, RGT85. Yeah, somebody representing Atom Bomb over here. Somebody showing some love for Atom Bomb. I mean, this guy was cut out of the game, and then he was cut from WWE, I think, probably that time, right around that time. He didn't make it to 96, but people are still talking about him. So Josh Sway has that footage out there somewhere. So maybe there's like some kind of hacker or somebody who can go and put him into the game. Because, people are putting Michael Jordan in NBA Jam. They're adding Jack from Titanic to Mortal Kombat 2. I mean, God, somebody's got to be out there willing to put Atom Bomb into the WrestleMania.
Yeah.
All right, let's see over here. Can we talk about the Petrovich glitch? Fire fatalities, the XXX NBA Jam circuit board. Ooh, some good stuff over here. Yeah, let me go through these real fast. The Petrovich glitch, that happened. Are you familiar with the Petrovich glitch, Joe?
I'm not. I'm all ears right now.
All right. So this one involves Drazen Petrovic, and let me see if I can pull up a picture of him real quick. Actually, you know what? I can. Let me leave that for afterward. I've had enough technical issues. I'm not going to play that too much with it. Drazen Petrovic, great player in the early '90s, who unfortunately died, and I think it was a truck hit him when he was in Germany. And he was a really cool guy. Somebody who was really on the come up in the league. And he was on the New Jersey Nets at the time, and he was added to NBA Jam before the game came out. Well, by the time the game comes out, Petrovich dies, of course, in this horrible accident, but his image is still in the game. So the Midway guys decide to leave it in there. And of course, you can't do DLC and patches like you can now. It's a lot of effort to do that. So they just left him in the game. And they would still have, of course, NBA Jam machines in the office. They would just have them, they would turn them on, leave them somewhere. Well, one time, actually 2 times from what I've heard, developers were walking past these machines. Sometimes, I think, one of them in particular was late at night. Late at night, sound designer John Hay was walking through Midway, and all of a sudden he heard an NBA Jam machine pop up and go, Petrovich, Petrovich, Petrovich. Oh my gosh. And then later on, the same thing happened when a couple of people were playing Mortal Kombat 2, and there was an NBA Jam machine next to them, and it went off saying Petrovich, Petrovich, Petrovich. So there's this famous glitch in NBA Jam, this kind of ghost story that Petrovich is actually in NBA Jam, which is really peculiar. And I mean, it just adds to the fact that NBA Jam has so much weird stuff going on. You've got all these secret characters, you've got all the on fire stuff, of course, you've got the tank game, and now you've got a ghost story too.
That's
so
wild.
There's just so much going on.
That's the first I've heard that. That's wild.
Yeah. There's a pretty good YouTube video out there. I forget the name of the channel. It's something like Scary Gaming or Horror Gaming or something like that. They do a whole video about that. Definitely check that out. But yeah, that was just one of the amazing stories that came up. Fire fatalities, that was another thing that was in NBA Jam that not a lot of people know about. So in an early version of NBA Jam Tournament Edition, at this point, the Midway guys, with it being the Wild West, they're doing what they want. They're putting whatever they want in the game. So they put in the Mortal Kombat characters. Of course, those guys had to get removed. But they also put in a special fire fatality. And this fire fatality, what you could do with it was if you got on fire, you could push the other person and their whole body would turn into flames. Whole body. Not just, you wouldn't just see a little bit of flame, you'd see the whole body turn to flame like the Human Torch. And then it would go away. But this fire fatality thing was really cool. The whole idea that NBA Jam had a fatality, or rather NBA Jam Tournament Edition had a fatality, was, of course, just another reason for people to play the game and try to find that. And, another hook that Midway used. And, of course, the NBA, I'm sure, heard about this, and they were like, take that out. We don't want to be associated with Mortal Kombat. We don't want any fire fatalities. But that was the thing that was almost an NBA Jam Tournament Edition as well. So much cool stuff out there. I mean, it just keeps going.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Let's see. What else have we got? Yeah. All right. So last one on this front was the XXX NBA Jam circuit board. Yeah. So when Tim was in the studio, Tim Kitzrow, the voice of NBA Jam, the classic voice. So back when he was recording those original lines, they got done with everything they needed for the original NBA Jam. So once they got done with the sections, John Hay, the sound guy who I was just talking about from the Drazen Petrovich story, John Hay and Tim, they were playing around, and they said, why don't you say some more things? So Tim starts just adding curses to it. So he says things like, he's on fucking fire, and get that shit out of here. That's not a very good Tim Kitzrow impression, which is why you need to look it up, but this is definitely a thing. So John Hay and Tim, they did these recordings for fun. They added these recordings to a drive, and they eventually sent that drive on over to Acclaim for use for the home samples, or for the samples for the home version. And then somehow something got leaked or floated around, and there's actually an NBA Jam XXX version you can find out there for the Super Nintendo. So there's a SNES hack out there where you can actually hear stuff like he's on fucking fire in NBA Jam, which is, to me, also another story that's just so staggering. I mean, like, there's just so much stuff. It just keeps going and going.
I love that. I learned about that for the first time, I think, following you on Twitter. I think you posted a few of those clips in anticipation of your book. I thought that was really cool.
Yeah, it's so satisfying. It's just so satisfying to me that, like, you can hear something like that, and then people get so into it. There's a part of us that has this kind of childhood sentimentality, nostalgia, but then part of us is also like, ooh, what kind of dirty stuff does the game have, or is there anything that's kind of salacious out there? And that NBA Jam XXX, I feel like for a lot of people, it scratched some itches.
Oh yeah.
So, all right. Ooh, Joe, this is from Boom Baptist also. Joe, I've noticed you're way into hang time, maximum hang time, and the Showtime era of Jam. Yeah. Why do you think it was so overlooked? And what do both of you know about that game?
Yeah, that's tough. I would say, so I'll start right off and say, like, initially when I saw hang time, and again, that's in that Midway Wolf era of hardware with Open Ice and Mortal Kombat and Rampage World Tour, WrestleMania we talked about. I don't, boy, I'm just going to say it. I think I was kind of over NBA Jam at that point. I was looking for other things and newer things to play. And you had your Mortal Kombats, you had your Open Ice, which was the hockey version of that, which was, everybody was kind of crowding around that. And, another person you just talked about, Tim Kitzrow, absent from Hang Time and Maximum Hang Time. And
Yeah.
so I think when I stood and I listened and I was watching people play that, I was like, he really does bring an energy to that game that just his voice, he's so into it and it's just so profound. And I do like Hang Time. I'm not saying that I don't. And obviously I have the board, I play it, I like it. And it's funny you're bringing that up because I have Hang Time and Maximum Hang Time, and I have NBA Showtime. I actually don't have NBA Jam or NBA Jam Tournament Edition in my
Really?
collection right now. I don't.
Wow.
So I would like to fix that, at
Yeah.
some point here. But yeah, and Showtime kind of ushered in the 3D era. That was kind of when we moved away from just the strictly digitized, sprites that we're seeing in NBA Jam and we're looking at in Hang Time, and now we're doing like the full 3D thing. And again, I think at that time people may have kind of been over it. I mean, it was a phenomenon. It was hot for a while there. I mean, they capitalized on that almost pretty quickly with Tournament Edition, fixed some things, threw in some new features, and that was a wildly popular game. Obviously that's why we're here talking about it today. But
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. There's a little bit of a burnout, I think, at that point, and then you had the home versions already, and that was another thing where you're looking at these games being ported and people playing them at home and not going out to the arcade as much. And I know in Maximum Hang Time's case, that never saw a home port. It was kind of one last, nod from Midway to the arcade operators, because I think Hang Time actually was starting to leak into, or the release date for that was, it was out there. And so, well, I could, our customers can already play that at home. And they're like, oh, well, here's Maximum Hang Time. And they added Allen Iverson, which is my big go-to.
Right.
So I was able to play as Allen Iverson in Maximum Hang Time. And, they sent out the marquee, and it's an upgrade kit for the existing board that's already out there. But I don't think Maximum Hang Time ever saw a home version.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but yeah, I think that has to be part of it. Just a little bit of fatigue from that
Oh yeah.
genre.
I think you hit the nail on the head. In fact, I think it's more than a little bit of fatigue. I think it's a lot of fatigue. And I think as somebody who obviously I love Midway, I love NBA Jam, I think that NBA Jam is really good in small doses in the way that you can release another NBA Jam game today and have it be successful, but you have to make sure you're not really milking that franchise dry because there's only so much you can do. It's fun, but it certainly doesn't have the same kind of level of depth as a fighting game like, let's say, Mortal Kombat 2 or or Street Fighter or something like that.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that might be a little bit of hearsay blasphemy coming from me. But yeah, I think that that was definitely something that impacted it too. Yeah, it was it's just one of those things that happened. But yeah, in terms of things that I know about Hang Time and Showtime. So some of the features that were in Showtime were supposed to be in NBA Jam. So the creative player that was in Hang Time, that was supposed to be in NBA Jam. The alley-oops, that was supposed to be an NBA Jam. Now, you won't ever find any kind of footage of this out there because these were just things that were just in design documents. They were just things that they talked about, nothing that actually materialized. But there's a lot of things that you'd see in future Midway games and future Midway basketball games that all go back to NBA Jam, which just shows how deep those roots go. In fact, one of the original working titles for NBA Jam was NBA Showtime.
Yeah.
So you could actually, no, you still be owning whatever game NBA Showtime would become, but you might not own NBA Showtime today. You might own a different game if history had gone that way.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
And they also had lots of debates about that the free throws in NBA Showtime. With that being a new element, I know that there was a lot of debate on the Midway team about that, as in like, how do we do this? How do we not break the flow of this game up too much? So that small element in particular, they went back and forth on a lot. There's actually an article that I think it's in is it the Chicago Tribune? I think it's at the Tribune. Out there, you just look up Chicago Tribune, Mark Trammell, NBA Showtime, and you can read a whole article, a little profile of him from that time period, where he talks about that whole dynamic of like trying to figure out what to do with free throws.
Yeah, Yeah, because like you can foul, and then when you rack up, enough, was it
Right.
four or five fouls, then you end up on
Yeah.
the and it's 3 points. If they make that shot, it's a 3 point
Right.
uh shot, and then that team gets the ball then too. So you could potentially be down, 6 points if it's another just for fouling. So that's a big change in that game as opposed to, its predecessors.
Absolutely. I think that there was a lot of them going back and forth on how much should we break up the pace of the game. As in, should this free throw element be added if it's going to hurt the game? I mean, they had the same kind of debates with NBA Jam. They're actually working on a camera mode, a different kind of camera, where there's kind of a cutaway camera. So somebody did a dunk, it would cut away to somebody doing a dunk, like an animation. And then, of course, NBA Jam would probably play totally different if that happened. I don't think
Yeah.
it wouldn't be NBA Jam if the game stopped for a second, you watched it, and then you went back to the play.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's see. Tanya asks, she asks, do you have any Midway arcade machines? Joe, let's start off with you. Do you have any Midway arcade machines? I know you do.
I do. I have the sports station, the dedicated sports station machine, which has NBA Showtime Gold and NFL Blitz 2000 Gold in it. So you can switch back and forth between the two.
That's a good one.
Yeah, I waited that out because there's a lot of conversions out there. So it's an NFL Blitz machine that's been converted over to that sports station, which is still cool. I mean, it's still awesome to have that. But I wanted that full. I'm a nerd. I wanted that full side art that's split. It's got the NFL Blitz artwork at the top. It's got the sports station band through it, and then Showtime is at the bottom, and it's got that nice like purple wrap across the front of the control panel. It's a 4-player machine. I play it a lot, probably daily. I try to work in 2 or 3 games. I mean, honestly, now it's work from home. At lunchtime, I'll go down there and I'll play a couple games of NBA Showtime.
Yeah, boy. Can you think about the NBA and the NFL co-signing on a game like that now? Like, could you see that, especially in the arcade? Like, that's just such a far-fetched concept. I mean, this just goes to show Midway must have had some kind of magic touch. You know what I mean? They got both the NFL and the NBA to sign off on being in the same cabinet. Yep. I don't think I'm sure there's some kind of deep cut game out there that I'm forgetting, but you don't really ever see multiple sports leagues in a single game. In fact, has there ever been another one you can think of? I can't think of a single one.
I can't think of anything off the top of my head, but
there's got to be something. But yeah, it's such a cool machine.
Well, what about you? Because I know that you have a really interesting Midway machine.
I do.
You should hear about that.
Yeah. So I actually have upstairs in my garage right now. It's my garage is a mess, so I won't do anybody the disservice of taking my laptop up there and showing off the garage. But right in there now.
There's Twitter.
Yes,
follow them on Twitter.
There's Twitter.
You'll see a pic.
Yeah, follow me on Twitter. I'll post it sometime. But I actually have the Grid, which is one of Midway's very last arcade games, if not the last arcade game, in my garage. And it's super rare, and it just happened by happenstance. And it was just amazing that I was able to find it. But if you're not familiar with the Grid, definitely look it up on YouTube. They never converted it to any kind of home platforms. It's like one of those kind of anomalies like Sports Station, where it's just out there in the arcade. You never see a home version of it, but it's a really fun game. It's kind of like Spawn in the Demon's Hand or War Final Assault, one of those behind the back, late 90s, early 2000s third-person shooters. Really great game. But yeah, and it has Sub-Zero and Scorpion and Noob Saibot in there as secret characters. Awesome. Plus some other people. So there's some cool stuff. Awesome. Yeah. All right. This question is for me, although I'm going to want to pitch it to you too, Joe. Why does Midway hold such a special place in your heart? Boy, for me personally, Midway just really delivered on so many games time after time. And I always knew that I could count on a Midway game. Like, even if I wasn't 100% for it, like, honestly, Revolution X wasn't really my bag, I'd still at least look at it, or it'd be an interesting concept. And, Mortal Kombat was just something I fell in love with. I really loved the mythology of it. I loved the looks of it. And then also, what's funny is this is kind of personal for me. So I'm American born, but I grew up in Pakistan. And over there, you'll find a few machines here and there in arcades. There's actually some really cool stuff at certain points. But, you wouldn't ever really find Midway games. Like, you could find some Capcom games. You so rarely find a Midway game. I could only ever find Mortal Kombat. Never saw NBA Jam back there. I was there from 5 to 15, so about 90 to 2000. I was never able to find any of those. So Midway was always special to me. I mean, you have to go out of your way to play a Midway game. In my case, I had to, when I visited the States, I would make my mom take a photo of me playing Mortal Kombat 4 because that's how much it meant to me. So there was definitely that novelty aspect too.
Yeah.
How about you, Joe? So yeah, so in terms of game developers, how would you rank Midway? Like, as in, do you find that, like, in terms of their quality of their output, do you find that they're better or worse than other developers out there?
It's interesting because I think you started to touch on it. I think a few moments ago when you're talking about NBA Jam and how you can develop that fatigue factor. Midway seems really great. At the time of creating that arcade experience, something that was very addicting. It didn't require a lot of knowledge to just get in and play it, like, but maybe it was a little bit more difficult to master, obviously, because there's people who get really good at these games, but it was easy to pick up. So it had that addicting thing. But at the same time, the replay value over and over and over, and having to reinvent themselves, come up with different versions of these games and stuff, and it starts to get formulatic. Is that a word? Can I say that? You're a
Formulaic,
writer. You can.
formulaic, yeah.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
So it's been a long day. But that's kind of my take on it, I guess. Right? Like, it's they're really good at creating that experience in the moment, but it's not like something that, I don't know. Obviously, I've got the machine in my house, so there must be something about it that makes me want to go back and continue to play it. But it's not something I'll spend, like, 2 hours on, because I'll play
Right.
it, a couple times a day, and then, fade out. Obviously, if there's people over, friends, or they want to play it and stuff, but it's not something like where you can just sit and grind on it for, 2-3
Right.
hours. Like, you're just not going to do that. And that's just the style of the game. So I think they're, like, ridiculously successful at doing and excelling at what they intended to do in the arcade, which is, let's make something addictive that people want to play, that earns money.
Yeah, no, definitely. I also think that, yeah, I mean, again, somebody who loves Midway, I mean, I wrote a whole book about NBA Jam. Obviously, when my first writing gig was for this Mortal Kombat website, I've got a lot of passion for it. But I do think that where Midway's downfall was, at least in the arcade era, was that they didn't do enough different types of games. Like, they would do, you could get them to, they ended up doing the racing games like Cruising USA. You've had some shooters over there. They had some, like, one-offs like Trog, but
Yeah.
they didn't really, like, they didn't really do too much in terms of, like, okay, here's a Midway game that you're not expecting. Like, here's something crazy. And I
Yeah.
feel like that when they had a hit, they would just squeeze that, they would just milk the hit dry. And I think that's something that, Acclaim certainly did it when they got those Midway licenses, but I think Midway did it to some degree too, where they were just so caught up in that arcade scene or whatever they were working on. Of course, I don't know the
Yeah.
specifics of where the heads were at the time, but Capcom's output, for example, or at least by comparison, you've got so much more variety of games in there and bigger
Yeah.
cast, but you probably have bigger budgets too. All right, let's hit up one last question, and I want to play with this one a little bit so I can get your take on it too. All right, Rob Gibbons asks, what is your favorite era of Midway? Early '90s or late '90s? Ooh, let's expand it. What's your favorite era of Williams Valley Midway overall? So let's cover, the pinball, the video, the Defender Robotron days. I mean, you could even go to Pac-Man days if you're technically doing the Midway side. You got Tron in there. You've got all these classics. So knowing that Joe, I know that your passion is for more likely for a different era of Williams Valley Midway. Yeah, actually, yeah, you go first. What comes to mind when you think of your favorite game that's associated, or your favorite era associated with that Midway name?
I mean, we talked about them. I mean, so it's not a very exciting answer for me at this point, because I think this is when I was old enough to, mid '90s was, I'm old enough to drive and take myself to the arcade, and this is where I'm spending my time, and those were the games that were in there. I mean, there's a reason why I went through and collected all the Midway Wolf boards. It's not necessarily because they're the greatest ones that they've ever produced, but they're the ones that I played that, remind me of high school, the ones that I played with friends. And that's my era. So I would have to say that, that maybe mid '90s. I'm kind of taking the cheap way out here, but that's where I'm at, because it was open ice. It was NBA Jam, fading a little bit then into Hang Time. Obviously Terminator 2, big memories off of that. That's really where I'm at. I mean, the Robotron and, you're talking about some of those types of games earlier. I was just a little bit a little bit too young. If I was there in the arcade, it was because I was there with an older kid, that I was allowed to tag along with or something like that. Didn't necessarily have my own pocket money. I'm watching other people play stuff. So, I certainly enjoy that stuff now. And, but my era is from my glory years of high school.
Yeah. So yeah, it's pretty much the same for me too. So for me, the peak Midway goes probably from 1990 or so, maybe the beginning of Narc until probably right around when Mortal Kombat 2 comes out, let's say. So for me, that's just really actually, you know what? I'll go as far as to add WF WrestleMania because I love that game. Love that game. I still love that game. It's a great game. And there was something really special about that group of people and how they were developing stuff at the time. The consoles weren't really a factor at that point for them to worry about. Like they didn't have to really worry too much about, do we have to make it different for the home market? Is Acclaim going to do this or do that or whatever? I mean, that wasn't really a factor. And then of course, by the late 90s, Midway's arcade era is going downhill. And don't get me wrong, there's some games I love. Like I love Carnival. I love Hydro Thunder. Love the Grid.
That's a good one.
I love Mortal Kombat 4. Yeah. But even then, I mean, those early 90s games, those are very special. And I think that's one of the reasons that that people always clamor for these kinds of games in, let's say, arcade one-up cabinets. Like they want to see games from that kind of specific era of Midway. You don't hear as much about late 90s Midway, or, you don't hear about people saying revive late 90s Midway as much as you do early 90s Midway.
Yeah, I agree.
So, all right, let's see. Okay, let's get one more question in. Boom Baptist asks, what is the current state of the NBA Jam license? Current state of the NBA Jam license, as far as I know, is that as of 2019, is that it still belongs to EA. I'm not sure they're doing anything with it. I don't know who owns it now. I do believe that they gave Arcade One Up their blessing to have the arcade games made, or these home games made. I'm not 100% sure on that. That's just my take on it from what I've heard, at least from what I guess. But yeah, as far as I know, it's still EA. I wish somebody else would pick it up because NBA Jam was one of those franchises that if it came out, it would be a big deal. You definitely don't want to milk it dry. You definitely don't want to release NBA Jam every 1-2 years like they did back in the day. But I think you could definitely stand to make another NBA Jam right now and have it be a success.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, let's see. All right. So it is 7:27. Boy, we're almost 15 minutes over. So just want to talk a little bit about some stuff to do after this. If you haven't checked it out, I mentioned it earlier, definitely check out Scarlet Sprites panel. It was great, a lot of fun, some real good information about learning about buying arcade games. In fact, I screenshotted your panel. Like as you were talking, I screenshotted a couple of the slides. I was so into it. I'm definitely gonna use them for myself. So if you're learning about buying arcade games yourself, definitely go back and check out that panel. Also check out Josh Sway's panel that features me for part of it, and then not at the very end. It's all about this amazing movie called Insert Coin that's coming out about Midway. And then also my publisher, Boss Fight Books, who published NBA Jam the book, which I have right here again. They are putting up a 10% off code for it, I think for this weekend for UPLINK. So yeah, just visit bossfightbooks.com and our UPLINK for that 10% off code. Definitely follow us on Twitter and Instagram. Joe has tons of great stuff, so definitely check him out at Scarlet Sprites. And be sure to check out that YouTube channel as well. And then I'm on Twitter and Instagram myself. Joe, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for bearing with me through my technical issues before and anything else.
I was very excited that I was able to be a part of this with you. It's something that's obviously very important and something that's right in my wheelhouse. And so to be alongside of you for this and listen firsthand and be able to, I could have been in the chat, but here I am able to talk to you through it. So it was very, very special for me, and I appreciate it.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for joining me. It's been great to have you over here. All right. Have a crazy good rest of UPLINK, everybody, and take care. Peace.